There is no growth in comfort and no comfort in growth. Yet the big leaps are how careers are made and how businesses excel. So how do you master not knowing at all or feeling like an imposter? How do you have the conversations that will lead to trust and, of course, excellence? How do you take charge of the things that you can control? How do you thrive outside your comfort zone? That's what this podcast is about. I'm your host, Wanda Wallace, and it's time to get out of the comfort zone. Welcome to the conversation. All right, today we are talking about body language. And I want to say it straight out, if you don't appreciate this, I suspect that your body language conveys more about you and your message than the words that you say. All right, so stay tuned. You're going to hear a lot more about it. We want to talk about how to use body language to get attention and to keep attention. We're going to talk about how body language helps you build relationships and show empathy. And we're going to talk about how body language helps you understand about deception. So teasers for all of those coming. My guest today is one of my favorite writers on body language, Martin Brooks. He's an experienced communications coach and trainer. And he has this fabulous book that is a set of 50 illustrated cards that talks about key body language. It's called Body Language Decoder. You can learn more from him at successthroughimpact.com. I should say that Martin is in the UK and he has been on the BBC and the Discovery Channel helping analyze body language, in TV personalities, on TV shows, and in all sorts of interesting places. So Martin, great to have you on the conversation today.
Thank you so much, Wanda, and I'm really looking forward to having a good old chat with you and you pulling some nuggets out that will be useful to your listeners.
I think there's going to be a lot of nuggets here. All right, now I started with a tease that you've done a bunch of things for the BBC, and I know about some of those, but the most recent one, you're working on this thing called The Traitors Show. For people who are not watching the BBC, what is that and what are you doing with them?
So basically, it's a celebrity version. It's actually a celebrity version, and it's a game show where, in this case, 19 people are in the room. 3 of them are designated as traitors. So they're like killing off one of the other set, which are called the Faithfuls. Now, the traitors are known to themselves and to each other. So there's 3 in this group, but all the other 16 Faithfuls have no idea who they are. So, and every night, one of the traitors will get together and they'll murder one of the Faithfuls, which means they get exited off the show, and then they have to, and the Faithfuls have got to try and figure out who the traitors are and then vote them off. But the interesting thing is that it's all really about how well can you lie, how well can you avoid detection. So what I've been asked to do for a newspaper, the London Standard, was review the body language of those traitors to see if there are any deception tells out there. And it's been quite frustrating because I'm like, the final's actually tonight, the finale is actually this evening, and I'm shouting at the screen, can't you see this deception tell? Can't you see a truth slip? Can't you see, there's a drooping delight? And of course they're not aware of them, they can't see them, and therefore week after week they've been voting out the Faithfuls rather than actually getting to the traitors. So it's been fascinating viewing.
There is an old Teams game that does something very similar. I've used it in occasions when I wanted a team to understand that they had partial information and they weren't really sharing all that information, and you had to change the climate in order to get it all shared. Okay, but let's get back to your story, which is, so give me an example of one of the tells that is so obvious to you that no one else sees.
Yeah, well, it's actually fascinating. One of the things that I find really interesting is that the old adage, the body speaks the mind. The body speaks the mind. So if you're trying to conceal something, it's an unnatural act. For example, if we take deception as an example, it's an unnatural act to lie. We don't like it. We don't enjoy it. And of course, there's always that fear kicking around the back of our heads if we'll be discovered, if we'll be found out. And it's almost like the body desperately wants to tell the truth. So one of them, I call it, is referred to as a truth slip. So if somebody gets asked, is that the case? And they're lying, and they'll go, oh yes. And they'll nod their their head side to side in the no action whilst actually saying yes. And it's like, well, hang on a second, your body's saying one thing and your mouth is saying the other. That then causes a little bit of confusion in the person watching that, and which is why I refer to it as a truth slip. Your body language has then leaked the truth, and it's quite common in business leaders and particularly politicians. You see quite a few of those in more interactive, hard-hitting interviews. It's always an interesting one to look out for.
Yeah. I have been noticing that lately, and I find an awful lot of people shake their head side to side to say no while they're trying to do something affirming. And I haven't stopped to say what's underneath, but I suspect what it is a half-truth. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We got to go back up to talk about the body language components for getting attention and building empathy. And then I want to come back to these deceptions that happen in business life and how to be aware of them. So let's start at the core of this podcast, experts. So it used to be the case that if you had deep expertise, we didn't really care how effective you were at presenting your content information. We would hang on every word because we needed your expertise. Now, we might not listen to anything you said about how to implement that, but we certainly listen to the expertise. All right. But today, everybody's attention is so fractured. And you all know why, a zillion reasons why, that getting and maintaining the audience's attention becomes so essential, even when you are the expert with the information and trying to get everybody there. So how do we use body language, one, to get attention, and then two, to sustain it?
Well, let's think about once we talk about lots of things developing and changing, let's talk about something that's actually more constant, and that's how our brain works. And of all of our senses, our primary sense is our sight. It's what we see. It's what we use to make those snap judgments. Do I like somebody? Do I trust somebody? It's that classic, on the African plains fight or flight scenario. Are you somebody I'm going to fight? Are you going to be a friend? Are you going to be a foe? So it really is clicks into that basal ganglia, that real reptilian inner brain, those instant decisions that we make. And whilst lots of things are changing fast, social norms, learnings, etc., that hasn't. But what's happening is that people are not necessarily thinking about that. Most people are, when they're interacting with others, they're very internal inside their own head. What is it I'm going to say? What I'm going to say next? The focus is very much in here. So there's two things that they've forgotten. One is that people need those visual things to back up that expertise. They need to see they need to make that snap judgment about the expertise. Does what they see line up? And also the other side, which I think you're going to touch on as well later, is like, how's it being received? What is that person making giving the behavioral evidence that this is making sense, that they're getting it, that they're understanding it? Or in a commercial complex scenario, are they buying into that? Are they sufficiently motivated to go out and do the thing that the leader or the manager or the boss or the salesperson is actually saying? So I think that aspect of that visual part of it, going back to the very core construct of how we as human beings interact with each other.
Okay, now just for the record, I presume that somebody who is blind or has impaired vision in some capacity is now relying on other cues like the tone of voice. Do you know if that's true or not? Because I agree, 90% of us that have normal sight are going to go with sight first.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, there's two things on that. One of the things that actually blew my mind when I was watching the TED Talk by Amy Cuddy, and she was talking about about body language and power poses, and I'm sure you've probably seen that's one of the most watched TED Talks. But one of the part in there that she talked about was about how body language seems to be innate. That people, Olympic or Paralympic athletes who've been blind from birth would still do that celebration movement. They put their hands up in the air. They go, yes, I've won. Now, that means that because they've been blind from birth, that means they've never seen it. That means it's not a learned activity. It seems to be something that's innate. Now, what's interesting about that in terms of blind people then is that when one sense, the research suggests that when one sense is depleted, of course, you try and make up for it with other sense. Now, the interesting thing about body language is it doesn't happen by itself. It happens in tandem. And when you gesture or when you move, what happens is your voice changes as well. So they can hear the gestures. And that's the thing, when your hands don't move at all, it's more difficult to put that key emphasis on words and where's the real meaning in what's being said. But when you use your hands and you say, and this, and the hand movement goes along with where you want the vocal emphasis. So it's almost like if you imagine a sentence and there's a key word in it that's underlined, and you do a hand gesture at that time, then the voice will follow that emphasis. So the visual emphasis will help the vocal emphasis. So even if somebody can't see the hand gesture, they could be able to hear the vocal emphasis that is then in tandem with that body language. So you get this, and then for sighted people, then you get the full array. Everything all lines up. So the voice, the words, and the sound.
Okay, so voice, words, and sound. And you're right. I had never thought about this before, but when I make a gesture, whatever that gesture is, there's this slight pause in my voice. There's an emphasis on the words in that voice. There's a little more inflection in it. So yeah, makes sense to me, which is why when you stand your hands just stuck to your side, you probably sound pretty flat. Okay. All right. So sight is really primary. So what does that mean when I'm trying to get the audience's attention? What do I need to tune into?
Exactly. Well, the first thing is that because sight is important, but we are also human beings, we're also predators. So our eye, so we've got the classic physiological makeup of a predator. We've got forward pointing eyes, we got pointy teeth, and our eyes are drawn to movement. So movement draws the eyes in. If you're looking at a still background and something moves, your eyes will just automatically go to it. So if you're a speaker, if you're a leader, if you're somebody who's looking to get their team bought in, and you're the one thing that's not moving in the room, then people's eyes are going to wander. And so that movement in the gestures, particularly in the facial expressions, if you're doing like as we're doing now, we're communicating, via the web, so there's less of the body available. Then that key thing about movement draws the eyes in, particularly in communication that's a little bit longer because the eyes get bored, they tend to wander. So that movement then just brings people's, not only their eyes, but their attention back in, and not the phone, or not the person who's walking past, or not the person who's going, do you want a cup of tea or a coffee? It's like, go away. So that visual aspect helps draws people's eyes in, whether that's facial expressions, gesture, or posture shifts depending upon the environment.
All right, now presumably I can't use the same gestures over and over again because that becomes distracting and we stop paying attention. Is that true?
Well, yes and no. I mean, you've got to do it really badly over a period of time. Go, oh, they've done it again. And it's a little bit like verbal tics. Sometimes when people go, and if you're one of those persons who's got a verbal tic, and there's more than 5 people in the room, one of them will start counting them. And of course, as soon as they're counting that verbal tic, they're no longer listening to content. And the same can be true of body language, that people can get drawn into it, but you need to overdo it, you need to do it badly. So this is one of the things I always say, you want to have a range of ways of being able to express yourself. And you can get away with doing something repetitively when it is aligned with what's actually being discussed.
So yes, I've certainly seen people overdoing gestures where they do the same thing over and over and over again, and it's so repetitive you just start paying attention to that and not to the words, and you get that with a verbal tic for sure. Okay, I can see that one, overdoing it. You've just explained to me now, though, why a tactic I often use in front of an audience works. And that is when I come to want to summarize something, I often say, look, there are 3 points, and I'm holding up 3 fingers. Number 1, number 2, and number 3. I do that partly because it draws attention to it, but partly because it helps me remember how many points it was I wanted to make. But the movement of that is getting attention, as well as then the content is relevant. All right, so movement in my voice, movement in my body, movement in my hand gestures are drawing people's attention in. Okay, now how do I got their attention, now what?
So again, once you've got their attention, I mean, I always think about communication is that, particularly in this day and age, it's not like a one and done. It's not like, oh, I've got their attention now, great, now I can speak to them for the next 15, 20, 30 minutes. No, it doesn't work like that. There's a constant re-engagement that we need to do. And the best way of doing that is making sure that our content outwards is engaging, and also something I think we're going to pay attention to shortly is making sure that it's landing in the way, paying attention to our audience's body language and making sure that they are still engaged. So not assuming engagement, but working for it and checking that that's happening. So that comes along with, how do you use your body language then potentially to illustrate things? So you given a great example there of what we refer to as signposting. So let me share 3 facts with you. And it's like, oh, great. So there's a visual connection to what you're actually saying. You can also then have what I call supporting gestures. So this is a big opportunity. It's a very small investment of time or effort. Now, those are supporting visuals because I'm doing this movement, I'm opening my hands up for a big movement, for a big thing, and I'm showing a small gap between my thumb and my forefinger for this small investment of the time. So again, that's aligned with what's actually being said. And then you can supplement those with general overall, like credibility gestures, like the parallel hand shop, the saying that this is what we're doing. And this is actually a really great one for vocal emphasis as well. This is what's happening. This is the plan. This is the project. So you got to come back to your earlier point there. You got quite a variety in how you use your body language just from the gestures. And then, of course, you've got your facial expressions as well. So if you're saying, this is a fantastic opportunity, you'd smile, you'd look all bright and breezy. And then if you go the other way, if this is a compliance or a legal issue, you go, and this is a serious point that really needs to happen, and then you have a furrowed brow, your voice then would go down, be slower, be deeper, so that all of those things coming together really underpins that message in terms of emotion, feeling, and the core things that you want to say.
Yes, it makes sense, the hand gestures, it makes sense the voice intonation, it makes sense the facial expression, and all of those are a way of making sure that your audience is with you. But there's another one too. It's, like when I'm a big fan of Alex Pentland's work on honest signals. I'm sure you know this work, the body signals that we give away, often unconsciously, as you said at the beginning. But when you have energy, when you're when you're genuinely really excited about something, think this is a great opportunity. You hear it in my voice, you're going to see it on my body, you're going to see it in a lot of different things. And that stuff is just, it naturally happens. You can't hide it. You can't display it. And it draws the audience in.
Yeah, I think the rapper Chuck D said it best when he said, in order for an audience to buy from you, they have to buy into you. So if you don't look and sound like you really believe and have that energy or enthusiasm for what it is that you're saying, whether that's a product, whether that's yourself, whether that's your company, it's very hard for people to buy in. They need to see that energy and hear that energy as well. So those signals that you're getting out, it's almost like you're agreeing with yourself. That they need to see that in order to be able to buy into what it is that you're saying, for sure.
That makes tons of sense. Okay, so you have talked about recognizing whether you've lost the audience. What are we looking for to know? I mean, often leaders will say to somebody, you need to learn to read the room. I think what that means is you need to learn to understand when you've lost the audience. So let me just translate that straight out. I think that's what they mean. What am I looking for?
Well, here's the interesting thing. We talk about this idea of active listening. And this is where people will do as you've just done. You just nodded. You've clearly heard that term before. You've gone, well, yeah, I know what that means, right? So there's a recognition of what's being said. So there's a cognitive, yeah, I've heard that before. That makes sense. Now, of course, what's the opposite of that? You've heard that before. No, that doesn't make sense. And you very often see people kind of look away, have a bit of a furrowed brow, and go, well, hang on, is that what I've heard? Or that's not the stat I'm sure somebody else had mentioned. So you'll see confusion, or you'll see querying. what I always find fascinating is where people hear something and it's not, they don't think it's right. They automatically think they've misheard. So very often what they'll do is they'll look at the person next to them. Almost like, did you hear what did I? You know, and they look around. Are other people similarly confused, or is it just me? So like there are examples of people getting it and understanding it, like the nod or the vocally one you just did. That's that little confirmation. Then what's the opposite of that, whether it is confusion or not getting it? And I think the third element then is where you've lost people. They just tune out. And that's kind of difficult, because with active listening, you've got a scale. Some people are very active listeners. They're like, yes, they're like that. And other people who are very inactive listeners, they don't tend to give a lot away. So they're kind of trickier to work with. So when you're working with, so the first thing is trying to establish a baseline of the people that you're talking to. How expressive are they? And then, of course, if they drop off a little bit, then you can notice it. But if you've got people who aren't particularly active listeners anyway, then that makes it more tricky. And you'll probably need more, so is that making sense to you? You'll actually look to engender that positive. So does that make sense to you? And if there's somebody in the room, you might go, Wanda, just making sure this is all still okay with you, so you can then generate from an inactive listener a positive response. Of course, if you say that and they go, yeah, and it's like, well, hang on a second, clearly there's a vocal and a visual clue that it's not making sense. I'm glad I checked. And this is really important, where we got to do what I call layered communication. So it's like, you need to understand this bit to understand the next bit. You need to understand that bit to understand the next bit. So obviously, if there's been a tune out or a miscommunication at the bottom level, stuff that will be built on top of that will then, of course, be completely scuppered. So checking in with people who aren't as active listeners, looking to get that response from them, is something that's a good tool to have in your armory. And the underlying idea is pay attention to how people are responding, and then that can help give you your next action.
So I want to look that they're nodding, that their heads are, sort of saying yes, or they're looking around going, what, where? I want to look that they're still maintaining eye contact with me in some capacity, so they're tuned into that. I want to look for the sound of agreement, in a verbal agreement. And I want to be careful to check if I've just got what I always describe as the stone wall face, which I have no idea what it means. And I have learned, painfully, I must say, that I have to stop and say, okay, I can't read your facial expression. So just give me a clue. Are you tracking with me? Is there confusion or doubt? Or are you just processing? I always put that in there, and I get 90% of the time, oh no, we're just processing.
Yeah.
And it's like, it just reassures me, so I don't go off a rail somewhere trying to get that verbal affirmation from them when they were already with me in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. And one more thing to add into that one, Wanda, as well, is like, are you getting the emotional response that you should get? So if you're saying something, this is really exciting, and they're like almost like going, I say, well, hang on a second. Okay, I'm getting intellectual confirmation, but I'm not getting that emotional confirmation. So there's a big difference between understanding something and understanding and buying into it and then acting on it. So check out for what you would expect to be the emotional response that you'd want to get. Are you seeing that? Are you getting that feeling? And if you don't, like you say, then doing that little check-in and going, well, what are you thinking? How are you feeling about this? And
different teams have different groups. There becomes a norm about how they respond or don't respond, and they will literally sit, kind of almost rigid, with a pleasant expression on their face. There's not any emotional problem here or there, and you feel like you've completely lost them. And then the next day they say, that's the most amazing talk I've ever heard in my life. And you're going, whoa, I finally did learn that I had to be careful with interpreting that particular body language.
For sure.
It's interesting process. Okay, let's shift gears for a minute. I want to talk about building relationships with your team. So anybody who's listened to me at all in the last 6 months to a year know that I have been haranguing on this issue, that especially if you have a younger team, you have to have them believing that you care about them as a human being, not just their productivity. If you don't have that sense of caring that they believe, whether you do or don't isn't the issue, they believe it, then you're going to struggle to give effective feedback. You're going to struggle to keep motivation up. You're going to struggle to get accountability. You're going to struggle to get ideas. You're going to struggle to get anything going. It's the ground. So I want to know, how do I use body language to convey I care, or empathy is another word?
Yeah, for sure. Well, actually, you mentioned one of the key elements of this earlier, and that is eye contact. And one of the things I've always found fascinating was ex-US president who was very well known for being able to create that effect of I'm here for you, I am listening, I'm giving you my full attention. And he calls it his be here now strategy. And I actually teach this with leaders in business schools or in businesses, because leaders like US presidents have got a lot going on, and there's probably lots of people trying to get hold of them. There's pressing issues, etc., etc. They're spinning lots of plates. But one of the first things, in order to really just switch into the people that you're with and let them know that you are the center of their world at that point in time, it actually has to be an intellectual decision. And that's his 3-word strategy: be here now. Then when you've decided that intellectually as a leader, then the behavioral traits will more naturally flow. But if you haven't made that intellectual decision in your head, if you're trying to multitask, if you're trying to spin plates, go, yeah, you talk to me, right? Now, they don't know what plates you're spinning, but they get the feeling that you're not completely here. Part of your brain is somewhere else. And of course, they don't know what that is. They don't know how serious it is. And they may start to think, well, it's me. You don't like me. You don't think what I'm saying is interesting. And of course, the opposite can be true. So the first thing is for the leader to do is to make that decision. Be here now. Whatever it is, just decide for the next 30 seconds, for the next 10 minutes, whatever it is, you are now the center of my world, and then the behavioral things can flow. The first of those is eye contact, letting people know that lock and load. And I've met people who have met this US president, and they've all said exactly the same thing. And one of them, an investigative journalist, said this phrase, said, he made me feel like I was the only person in the room. And it was that one of those things was the key: lock and load, absolute eye contact, not looking over their shoulder, not looking at their watch, not checking their mobile phone every 5 seconds, but just absolutely giving them their full attention. So that one was really, really important. The second thing then about which we've just been talking about is doing the active listening. Now, not just like nodding every 10 seconds like a computer program, but actually listening to what people are saying, and where those key elements of agreement come in, letting them know, oh, yes, absolutely, I've heard that. Yeah, and that mirroring the emotion, that you're not just listening to the words, that you're doing emotive listening, that you're going beyond the actual intellectual understanding to the feelings that is giving the person who's giving you that message. So if a subordinate comes to a boss and said, I'm really worried about that, you could say, oh, I understand you're really worried about it. So there's an intellectual confirmation there, but there isn't an emotional heart connection to that. So you go, I get that. I understand that you're really worried. So if the facial expressions and the body language go with it, then the team member goes, they're not just intellectually hearing that. They're hearing that, they're feeling that on an emotional level, because I can see it. The third thing then that leaders can do to really convey that listening is what we call the mouth cover. We talk about the metaphor often in a team environment of the talking stick. Somebody has the talking stick. And one clear visual indication when you're talking with somebody else that they have the talking stick is to act in the exact opposite way when a person would have the talking stick. So you have the talking stick, you've got it. I am now in listening mode. So the hands come up and actually cover the mouth. We call this the mouth cover. It's one of the cards on Body Language Decoder. So you cover the mouth. So if you're on a desk and round meeting, that's very easy. You put your elbows in the desk and you just cover your mouth. Or if it's a corridor conversation, you can always take one arm, make a platform for it, put the elbow on that platform and go, oh, I see, right. And this is a really strong visual confirmation that the other person has the talking stick. I'm not talking, you're the person talking. It's a very clear indication. And that can be really useful when a more senior person is talking to a more junior person, to give them the signal, you have permission to talk. You have the talking stick and I am fully in listening mode. And that then really gives people the confidence to influence upwards, which is often really important and leaders miss out on because they don't give them that signal that the more junior person has the permission to speak.
Okay, now, presumably, though, I don't want to keep my hand over my mouth all the time, because otherwise that becomes like I have a habit. One of my bad habits is I put my fist up to my chin and I sort of prop my chin on it, which is a little bit lazy on my part. But
we can utilize that. We can utilize that. So what you can do is you can put your fist on your chin, or then you can turn your head to one side and just point to your ear.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm listening.
Okay. All right.
There you go. So you can utilize that one.
I don't want that to get sloppy, that it starts to look like, oh, I'm trying to go to sleep here because... Okay, all right. So 3 things. 1 is the eye contact. 2 is the body language that says I'm actively listening, the nodding, the yes, the verbal things.
Yeah.
But and showing the emotion that's appropriate to the situation. So letting that reflect in your face. And the 3 is the mouth cover gesture. I like that one. All right, I want to come back to the eye contact because everybody says, yeah. But I want to caution everybody who's listening how easy it is to think you're doing it and not to do it. So I'm going to give a personal story on this one, and then you could tell me what I'm missing, Martin. I noticed when I come into my building in New York that it's very easy to see my doorman every day and say hello, all the usual things, but I never make eye contact. I look generally at the face, but I don't actually make eye contact. And I think you tell that. I think you can see when somebody bothers to pause and actually look in your eyes. So I try to make an intention every day to make sure I make eye contact. And you can just see people light up. It's like, yes, you notice me.
Yeah, it's that human connection thing that we've always needed. And I feel in the technological world that we live in now, I think we need even more. And I think certainly in COVID, when we moved to doing everything remotely, and I had the experience of doing a keynote training, and everybody had their cameras turned off. And it was just like, I was sitting in my home office and I think, am I talking to myself? Not only could I, because it was such a big audience, everybody had mics off, but I couldn't see anybody. And I was like, so I've had this whole internal dialogue in my head going, the connection could have failed 5 minutes ago, and I could be sitting here just talking to myself because and I actually made it a point. So I'm never doing a keynote again where everybody's got their cameras off because it was so disconcerting. And I'm sure if I had been listening to it, I could hear the drop in that content in my voice, the vocal inflection and stuff, because my brain was just saying you're having a conversation with yourself. So that we never underestimate that, and it's the good quality eye contact. Now, the other thing is to mention here, sometimes people go too far. They just stare at people all the time, and that can be quite disconcerting. And different people like different levels of eye contact. And one of the things to get right about it, or one indicator of what's right for them, is when you're looking at somebody, when they give you a prolonged blink, that is as a way of them saying to you, yeah, I could do with a little break now. So that's where you could just look down at your notes or just look over their shoulder and then come back. So that people give you an indication of when enough is enough and now actually that's a little bit too much. So always pay attention to that. But coming back to your key point about eye contact, it's one of those simple but highly effective things that we can do to let people know that you're being here now with them.
And so I challenge everybody, don't just look at the face. Actually make contact with the eyes. And you're right, there is a cultural difference and an individual preference difference on how long we hold that gaze. But I think everybody wants some eye contact somewhere. So anyway, great. Okay, Martin, I got to shift gears. So let me just kind of try to do my usual recap here. So if I say that I want to know how to hold the audience's attention, get and hold their attention, then I'm looking to have movement in my body and my facial expression and inflection in my voice, because that movement will draw our eyes in and we'll pay attention, okay? To make sure that I'm keeping my audience, I want to be watching what body language they're sending back to me. Are they mimicking, meaning gesturing, nodding, saying uh-huh, or are they looking confused? Are they looking around the room and questioning? And careful, some body languages are my word, stone wall, but less emotive in what their emotions are. So you may need to ask. But you want to just notice, am I getting those verbal cues that are saying, yes, I'm with you, keep going? Okay? And then to show connection, particularly with subordinates, but it works everywhere, eye contact, as in really looking at somebody's eye contact, but not staring them down. Kind of, you don't want to go that far. Nodding, listening, not just gesturing for what they're saying to you, but also that mouth cover, your hands on your face or on your side or pointing to your ear or something that indicates you have permission to speak and I'm listening. And then the last piece is really listening for that emotion and showing that emotion that they're expressing on your face, whether it's worry or excitement or whatever. Okay? All right. So let's shift now and talk about deception. Everybody's favorite topic. What are the things we, especially at work, that we should be watching for to indicate deception?
Yeah. Well, there's a fantastic TED Talk, and it's one of the most viewed, but Pamela Meyer did a whole TED Talk on deception. And whilst it's fascinating in our personal lives, I mentioned traitors earlier, and that frustration that I had shouting at the screen and going, oh, can't you see the deceptive tells of the traitors? And actually, that's exactly what happens in the business world. We've got over-enthusiastic salespeople, or bosses chasing targets, or subordinates going over who don't want to admit the errors or that things may not happen on time, telling bosses what they want to hear. So that what's this mirror in the business world. So there's mini deceptions. Oh, I'm sure, yeah, we'll get that on time, up to the larger, more concerning deceptions. And Pamela said in her TED Talk, in 1 year in the US, it came up to $997 billion. It's a big, big deal. So it's really important to be tuning into that, to picking up when people are outright lying, or they're stretching the truth a little bit, or they're not entirely convinced about what it is that they're saying. So then we can check in. Now, this deception detection isn't an exact science. You might see some of these clues and go, okay, well that's not your prompt to go, your nose just twitched, you scratched your ear, I know you're lying, You can get yourself into all sorts of trouble. But what it should be a prompt for is more questions. Just checking in, because the more evidence you have, the more data you have, the more likely you are to be accurate. So the way I think of this is, it's not about, catching people out being deceptive, but it's about paying attention to how they communicate and when you should dive in and gather more information to make sure that that little funny feeling that you've got has got some accuracy to it. So in terms of what are we looking for, I think there's three really useful deception tells that we see, that I've seen a lot of, in fact, in the traders analysis. The first one is that truth slip, where you say to somebody, can you do that? And they go, absolutely, and they shake their head no. And it can be the opposite way as well. They can be saying no, but nodding their head yes. So pay attention for that one, because that's inconsistent. That doesn't make sense. Why would you shake your head no when you're saying yes? So then you delve into that a little bit more detail. So I'm delighted to hear your optimism, but tell me a little bit more about that. What's happening there? What's happening at this point? What's happening at that point? That should be a prompt for you to go, you know what? I'm not going to quite take your word for that. I'm going to delve in and ask some more questions and clarify. So the first one is watch out for those truth slips. The second one is what we call eye blocking. So the old idea that the eyes are the gateway to the soul. And we talked about the importance of eye contact. And when somebody is trying to deceive somebody else, guess what? They don't want you looking in their eyes. They don't want you looking in their soul. They don't want to give you that evidence from inside that this is not the truth. So you'll see what I call a prolonged blink. You'll see people do that. They'll blink, but they'll hold their eyelids longer than they normally would. which is more subtle than the classic people where they make lots of eye contact and all of a sudden they'd look away. It's rare that you get that because, that's well out there. Eye contact is important, but people who are lying don't tend to make it. So eye blocking is a more subtle version of looking away. Although the people who do lie and want to try and get away with their lies, what they'll do is they'll overdo eye contact. They'll go well beyond, and you could give them like a little signal that's too much, but they'll still keep staring at you, because they want to really, really convince you. And it's like, too much of a good thing can become a bad thing. But the third one, and this is my favorite, this is called duping delight. And this is where people have either the joy of feeling that they're deceiving somebody, or the joy of relief that a lie that they're telling is actually being believed. So duping delight looks like, let's say, for example, you're lying to me, and I say, Wanda, you've convinced me. Now, in that moment, you're going to feel a sense of relief or of joy. It's like, thank goodness for that. He's bought in. Exactly, and you'd smile. Now, if you do that, yes, he believes the lie. Hurrah! Of course, that would engender a lot of suspicion. But the body speaks the mind. So we're feeling those positive emotions. What happens is that the mouth will want to go into a smile before the intellect goes, no, don't smile, you idiot. Don't do that. That'll give the game away. So you get the corners of the mouth just twitch a little bit, or very often what happens in one corner will just like stay in a little smile, almost like, I'm getting away with this, fantastic. Now, it's quite a subtle one, so you can actually engender it by doing what I just said. So if you think somebody is trying to pull the wool over your eyes to see if you exaggerate the truth, or maybe even an outright lie, just go, okay, I was a little bit dubious about that, I wasn't sure, but you know what, you've convinced me, I believe you. And then absolutely lock and load and see if you get some duping delight. So you can look to create the circumstances where it's more likely to be there to spot, and then you've got better evidence upon which to base your next actions, more questions, or maybe go try somebody else because you're not entirely convinced by that person.
Okay, all right, I love that. 3 things. The truth slip. So what the body is doing, the head in particular, is opposite of the words that are coming out of the mouth. So a shake no or a shake yes, and then the words are saying the opposite.
Yes.
Eye blocking, in that there's a prolonged blink or a subtle look away, and it's just a little bit longer than you would naturally expect. So there's a change, and very subtle, as you rightly said. And a duping delight, a very subtle shift of, yes, I got away with this. And I'll see that in a twitch of the corner of the mouth, kind of a little bit of a smile in the eyes, or some version of that one, I would guess. Okay. Now, you told me a secret I did not know about somebody I am fairly certain flat out lied to me on occasion. And I was aware of the eye blocking. So I was trying to pay close attention to that. And what the individual did instead was exaggerate the eye contact. So now you told me there's the signal that probably it was a deception.
Yeah, because there's nothing more annoying than if you find out you've been deceived and you track back to that original communication. You go, oh, I knew it, but I couldn't, I didn't feel that I had any evidence to really act on it at the moment, but there was a little gut instinct. Now, what I say to people, that gut instinct is your brain spotting something that I may well have mentioned, or some of the other deception tells in Body Language Decoder, but because you don't know what you're looking for, you couldn't nail it, or you didn't have that prompt. You went, oh, I'm there, it's probably going to be fine. And then like 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months later, you find out, and you go, oh, I knew this. I knew it at the moment, but I didn't have the evidence. And I think that's where the real value in paying attention is, because we won't get caught out as often, and we'll ask more questions. And because lying is an unnatural act, if you, through questions, you force people to stay in the lie, then they're much more likely to go, well, actually, and they'll tell you the truth, because they don't want to stay in that uncomfortable spot.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Yes. Sometimes it takes longer than a few days to figure out that the deception has actually occurred. Though you're right. There's an intuition that it was not accurate, and, you don't know what to look for. All right. But as you said, Martin, it's not like at work I'm trying to find out that my team is lying to me, and so I'm suspecting every single gesture that comes along. It's just when I spot these, I don't want to stop there. I don't want to assume it's a lie, and I don't want to assume it's the truth. I want to inquire. I want to probe deeper and find out more information. And except in extreme cases, I think most people will start to come a little cleaner on what's really going on if you probe a little bit more, give you a little bit more evidence. Martin, no doubt we could talk for another 5 days because everybody loves this body language piece. It's exciting to recognize what I do that draws listeners into me. It's also exciting to know all this kind of idea about how do I tell if somebody's really lying to me as also. So it's great fun. If somebody wants to reach out to you, Martin, where's the best way to find you?
So you can find me on the web. You mentioned my web address, successthroughimpact.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can find me there. You can find Body Language Decoder on Amazon if that's something that you're interested in. You can go there and find that. So yeah, in the internet-based world, if you type in Martin Brooks and body language on Google, I'm sure you'll come across me.
All right, sounds wonderful, Martin. Thanks very much. And I highly recommend the card deck. It's sold like it's a book, Body Language Decoder, but it's just 50 illustrated cards that get some of the highlights about body language. You can pull out ones by different categories, practice them, work on them. You could hand them to a team member that you think needs to improve their presence in a room, get them to work on each one of those gestures. It's just a great set of cards. So well done, Martin.
Thank you.
All right. So thanks, Martin. And thanks for joining us for this week. Join us next week for another episode in Getting Out of Your Comfort Zone. If you want to watch this episode in person so you can see all these gestures live, please check out our YouTube channel at Out of the Comfort Pod. And there you can see the entire episode as well as some short clips taken from the episode. And send us your notes. We'd love to hear from you. outofthecomfortzone.com. See you next week.
Thank you for joining us today. Tune in for another edition next week with Dr. Wanda Wallace on the Voice America Business Channel. Reach outside your comfort zone this week.